bodies torn to shreds by the ravenous dragon. The enormous black putrid thing in the depths of the city that whispered of the master to its victims. Friends and loved ones, now deadly impostors, thirsty for innocent flesh and souls. I'm the Unlikely Genshin Gamer, and this is the story of Ochkanatlan, the third installment in a series of videos about the terrifying city of ash and demons. Check out the description for parts 1 and 2 about Ajaw and the Sage of the Stolen Flame, or else settle down and listen closely to this one. It's time we addressed exactly what happened in Ochkanatlan for all who want to know all the gory details but couldn't be bothered with all the detective work. You want to make sure that the lights aren't out. The darkness may be watching you. Now, without further ado, let us begin. According to my research, the quiet horror that Ochkanatlan is now is due to two major events, and it all began with the Python King, Ochkan, taking the throne. As most of you know by now, Ochkan was the half-human, half-dragon son of the disguised dragon sage, Was Ochkan. He was supposed to be the chosen one of dragonkind, the one who was supposed to save them, not plunge them into darkness. But things didn't work out that way. Perhaps something truly unspeakable happened in his childhood that set him at odds with the dragons and began his dark path. But what we do know is that he ended up the prisoner of the dragons for a time, until Xbalanque and his merry band of warriors freed him. And even though he was already strange with his one-eyed mask and open, let's just say strong, dislike of the dragons and saurians, Xbalanque and his men took him into their group. He proved faithful and valuable until Xbalanque passed on. That's when things got really weird, leading to his first big mistake. As I mentioned in the Ajaw video, the city of Ochkanatlan was one of the dragon's high-tech metropolis areas. Ochkan decided to repurpose it for the humans, and a bit of house cleaning was necessary, which began a terrifying chain of events, starting with the unearthing of the stinky, massive, wet black monster in the basement. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To do this story justice, first we have to talk about all the things that Ochkan, the insane young king, did leading up to that, all in the name of wiping out the dragons, so you can really understand what kind of king he was. When we read the Holy Sovereign notes scattered around the city, his thought process becomes pretty clear. He wasn't even as mad as people thought, rather astonishingly radical. When Xbalanque passed on, something in Ochkan broke. Or perhaps it's better to say that way back when Xbalanque killed the Pyro Sovereign and ascended to Archonhood, something was awakened in Ochkan. The possibility for humankind to rule themselves 100%. No shades, no gods, no night kingdom, and no dragons. And he took it upon himself to drag the entirety of Natlan, kicking and screaming, toward this future. And let me tell you, there was a lot of screaming. When Ochkan rose to power and decided to take over the city, he heard a rumor, perhaps from his father, that there were still tunnels deep under the city where useful secrets could be found. And because he realized that the very advanced machinery in the city needed to be in working order to make the city habitable, he gathered laborers from all over Natlan, having assembled the tribes into a grand alliance, and set them to work figuring out a way to drain the water that had filled this underground section of the city, so he could discover what lay hidden away beneath. The work was grueling and deadly, But for the most part, the workers of the 5 tribes that decided to send people remained mostly motivated by the idea that life would improve for their families and loved ones if they could push through, until the black thing appeared and began driving people mad. The deeper we dug, the stronger that indescribable, nauseating stench became. As the work progressed, a craftsman from suddenly lost his wits, screaming, laughing, crying, and all the while babbling incoherently about how he had seen an almost impossibly large, hideous, and swollen black silhouette in the watery depths, and of how it had shrieked a terrifying, profane song, commanding him to kneel down before the master. The supervisor took him away, but a sense of unease had already begun to spread among the workers. It's possible that he uncovered the heart of the abyss itself, or just a big old healthy offshoot of it. But either way, that thing began Natlan's very own zombie apocalypse. To really appreciate how terrifying everything was, you have to understand how tyrannical Ochkan became in his quest to liberate humans from everything stronger than them, including eventually himself. After his excavation team, which included the mysterious master craftsman Manku, you'll want to remember his name for later, uncovered the chamber down in the depths of the city, and the strange madness began to spread, Ochkan met with the ancient dragonlord over the technology of the city, Ishlel. As I explained in the Ajaw video, she was not just the operating system of the city, controlling all the sentinel robots, but also a repository of astonishing information. And what she told Ochkan fueled him to make a good many decisive and deadly decisions afterwards. He found out things that still have repercussions now. And none of those things helped with what came next. The waterway repairs have been suspended indefinitely. As though overnight, the deep well was completely submerged by a dark calamity, and all nearby residents were transformed into. The Tonatiuh warriors sealed the entrance and incinerated the infected, with flames borrowed from the Holy Sovereign, claiming that all was under control. Manku, the craftsman, was sealed down there to burn to death as well, even though he wasn't infected. Rather, he simply knew too much. But while he lay there dying, he also received haunting enlightenment from the now imprisoned Ishlel, in the form of golden tears dripping onto his face, and he too grew to properly understand what was at stake. He also learned of a passageway that could save him from the flames. He escaped with horrible, dripping scars on half of his face. At the same time, troubled by what he now knew, Ochkan grew extremely distrustful of the Wayob and the Night Kingdom, partly because they were institutions designed by a power greater than humans, and also because he didn't want anyone communing with the dead, as the Masters of the Night Wind are so skilled at doing, and finding out secrets he wanted to stay dead. And that ban on the worship of the place where souls were supposed to go and rest meant the people that he was having his warriors burn weren't staying dead. And their very souls were also being ripped to shreds by the abyssal creatures possessing them, the consequence of whatever he had awakened in the depths. What's more terrifying is, I think this is the enormous black thing that was prowling in the Mer Javari just before it disappeared, according to Sitlali. The same thing that Anju appears to be looking for. That thing and the lack of support from the Night Kingdom created a truly horrific scene. Cross-referencing the other documents in the city makes the missing words here pretty clear. The streets are filled with the scent of burning bodies. By the Holy Sovereign's decree, the 3 areas in the southwest sector have been sealed off, and the Quenin warriors are trying to incinerate all the bodies, which have decayed yet still roam. They have had little success. How can that which is finite defy the infinite? Not to mention how they too will end up the same way once they fall. Nothing but despairing wails now comes on the night wind, not only from the world of the living, but also from that long forbidden world. They are trying to break this gate down, but they won't get my soul, nor will they get the souls of the children seeking shelter here. At most, they shall get our bodies. I shall use this dagger too. The following parts are covered in stains and cannot be read. I suppose you can guess what the poor guy did next, to both himself and the children he was protecting. The city was steadily falling apart, but Ochkan was adamant. The casualties will inevitably decrease over time, so long as people gradually adapt. They may not yet comprehend why we do this, but they shall one day. One day, they will know that this was the only path amidst the many we could have chosen that could lead them to freedom from all external restraints. To survive by relying on the laws of night is akin to a traveler in winter setting their clothes alight to keep warm. The abyssal corrosion was manifesting as abyssal mimics. They looked just like the people they were mimicking, except they wouldn't die. And those reanimated corpses were really and truly the souls of the victims, crying out for release from the torment. Except they were never released, not until the very soul was simply shredded on the wind, like the ones lost to the Night Kingdom. In so many pieces they've been erased from the cycles of the world. The ban on worshipping the Night Kingdom meant that the masters of the Night Wind were powerless to capture and ferry the souls to the Night Kingdom before the abyss could grab the soul from the falling body. But still, even as the situation now became untenable, Ochkan doubled down, sealing off the city from the rest of Natlan and turning his attention to another issue, even as a rebellion was brewing against him amongst the angered tribes. Way, way up in the skies above, Ochkan was steadily completing a sky-faring ship, a place to hide and keep safe one half of a most devastating treasure. The nuke that I mentioned before. A weapon that the dragons had long ago devised that they believed would completely wipe out the abyss. But not without wiping out everything, and I mean everything else as well. Think of a scorched earth operation. Very possibly the ability to invoke a solar flare. The name of the weapon, the machine that could save Natlan but not us, as Bona said, is called Huitzil-Lapoctil, which is the literal name of the Aztec god of the sun and warriors. The items needed to call up this weapon are actually the dead Pyro Sovereign's eyes. Was Ochkan, Ochkan's father, kept one piece, which is the one that imposter Manku directs us to in the first world quest, and Xbalanque had the other, eventually passing it on to his friend Ochkan. It is this piece that Ochkan hid before he went absolutely mad, and of course, now the traveler has both of them. While Ochkan was carrying out his hidden plans, the plans against him were taking shape. With the Scarlet-Eyed youth and his band of misfit warriors like Yupanqui, a former friend of both Xbalanque and Ochkan, amongst these was the former master craftsman who had been severely burned, Manku, now a beggar and a drunkard in the streets. However, it's because he never forgot his time in the horrid city that Manku became integral in helping the team make their way to the heart of the city successfully. And when the Scarlet-Eyed youth, whose name was erased from history on his request, finally confronted Ochkan on the steps before his throne, the Mad King fell into complete insanity. Screaming in rage, he tore and ripped at his own flesh, leaving gaping holes which showed his true dragon self beneath the human-looking shell. Consumed by the golden flames it spewed, the disfigured form of that deranged soul fell from a great height into the pitch-black mire below. Forsaken by all, thus was the tragic end that this delusional outcast is said to have met. Not many people were left to be saved, and most of the city was completely destroyed. So ended the first tragedy that happened in the Cinder City. But the story didn't end there. Hundreds of years later, the legacy of that doomsday weapon would draw many more to their death. Was Ochkan, infinitely disappointed with his son's defiance, came up with a plan to bring someone to the city who could retrieve the golden entreaty from off of Ochkan's ship for him. And so began the tragic story of the Ochkanatlan adventure team. A group of optimistic adventurers and warriors fresh off of the recent devastation of the cataclysm and the loss of Mawika as she embarked on her 500-year-long waiting game. These brave souls were here to seek the legendary weapon which would stamp out the abyss that had taken so much from them once and for all. To steal from those wicked old dragons and do something good with their tech for once. Little did they know, they were playing right into the hands of two of them. The team featured Taika, Bona's father, Legba, Titu, Kopan, the scholar, Liriwu, a young prodigious shaman from the Masters of the Nightwind, and Quenin, a warrior, and his other brothers in arms. No one came back except Liriwu. You all are probably familiar with Quenin, the poor warrior plagued and haunted by the voices and zombies that constantly plagued the team. One by one, team members would disappear while on the trail, only to be replaced with imposters who were just not quite right. And those imposters would in turn kill others in the dark. No one trusted one another. You couldn't sleep for fear of who would slit your throat in the night. It got to the point where the dead in the camp outnumbered the living, so that you could be laying back to back with your decaying comrade. Quenin grew so troubled and paranoid, it drove him to suicide. He couldn't stomach the undead wails and the whispers in the dark. Even retreat from the city was impossible. Only the sound of the roaring waterfall near their camp brought him any comfort. One day, he finally hid under that waterfall and stayed there until he died. Somehow, his soul, which was still claimed by the abyssal creatures, retained much of its personality, and the Quenin we encounter has no idea he has already died until the very end. The rest of the team feared worse. Although a shaman with Liriwu's healing and soul-faring abilities was needed on the team, the others decided that the horror of Ochkanatlan was too much for this young prodigy, and left her behind in the safest parts of the city while they forged on ahead, determined to do their part to make sure the Archon sacrifice wasn't in vain, confident they would make it back. You can see them here through Ochkan's eyes, the eyes of the dragon man who didn't die but instead became his full dragon self. This conversation right here is the last time they ever spoke. Because when Liriwu finally gathered the courage to ignore the tormented, ripped apart souls everywhere and follow the team to the ship, she was met with horror. When the girl who had fled in the face of danger finally made it to their encampment, all that awaited were shattered corpses, the remains of the dragon's hearty meal. And because she had not been there soon enough to claim their souls before the abyss did, they were lost for good. all she could do was go back home to the Flower Feather clan in one piece and spread the stories of their bravery, telling little Bona about her father's sacrifice and encourage others to not give up on the promise of a way out from under the thumb of the abyss, playing right into Was Ochkan's hands, or rather his intelligent claws, because he used the souls that had been snatched away from these bodies by Ochkan to instead impersonate these people for the purpose of encouraging others to travel up to the sky and find this treasure, which in truth would absolutely spell their doom, not their salvation. But Bona figured it out, because she was able to awaken the spirit of Ochkan, the part of him that he split off of himself, the part that still held the sane, compassionate part of himself. Through Kokowik, she learned that the device they all sought was best left alone on that ship. And she realized that if she did not return, then perhaps no one else would come and die for the sage's plan. Her spirit lived on, although the memories faded. Of course, the traveler has fallen for the dragon's trick anyway, and has of course triumphed, obtaining both golden entreaties. But somehow, all entities, dragons, humans, gods, and all, wholeheartedly believe in the traveler's unlimited capacity to render good wherever they go. As Citlali told us,
"You alone transcend the value of gold. Even the most verdant leaf in the forest will pray for your happiness and safe passage."
Well, here's hoping that trust isn't misplaced. Ochkanatlan has been my favorite sub-region in Natlan so far. I spent so much time there exploring all the notes, so I could cross-reference them with the artifacts and material descriptions to find out this story. I can't wait to find out where the conclusion of this whole quest will lead when we get the last piece of the Natlan map. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this compilation of the Ochkanatlan story. And please remember to share, like, and subscribe so I can keep doing this. And I'll see you in the next one.